Good morning, Senators. The Committee of the Whole is back in order. When we broke yesterday, Senator Castro had the floor. If you wish to offer another amendment or continue your discussion, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In consideration of what was accepted by the administration, I want to offer one simple amendment. Sorry. I'm not sure if it's been passed around. You want me to read it into the record, or
why don't you read it and
Sure.
Let's see whether or not everybody needs to have a copy.
Okay. Basically, it's on line 6, page 8, section 3, effective date of increased BPT rate, sunset provision. The increased BPT rate of 6% shall be immediately effective and implemented following the enactment of this act by Imagat Lahin Guahan, and it shall remain in effect for 1 year therefrom. So the amendment, Mr. Speaker, is to go from 2 years to 1 year to a 1 year sunset provision. That's it. That would be page 8, line 6, starting at line 4.
Mr. Speaker, can we get a copy of the amendment, please?
We'll take a short recess. Colleagues, if you're going to be offering amendments, please have them ready so we can move. We'll come back to you. Senator Regine.
Just point of inquiry, Mr. Speaker. When we were in session yesterday evening, the representative from BBMR had stated that the administration would not be open to any changes in, it's my understanding, in the effective period. And he stated on the record, Mr. Carlson, on the record that 2% is their bottom line. He stated it again on the radio this morning, and so I just wanted to be clear that
That's BBMR, this is us.
Right.
What are we willing to do?
So if the proffer of the amendment could just respond to that.
Sure, thank you, Senator. This amendment is simply addressing the sunset provision. It says nothing about the 2 or 1%. So, I'm sorry. Yeah, there are no other amendments, ma'am, to the BPT other than the sunset. Well, I don't know. I can't recall exactly what he said to that on the radio, but I do know what he said last night. The representative said that the administration is willing to accept a sunset provision of 1 year as opposed to the originally proposed 2 years. So that's also going to be reflected in writing. I believe a member of the administration is walking down that letter right now.
All right. Again, what does this body want? Anybody else? Yeah, Senator Nicholas. Go ahead. No, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's just several things that were brought up that I think we need to really put into perspective here. First of all, I don't know if we're going to be able to balance this budget in a year. We don't know where the new revenue is going to come in from to offset any reduction. We don't have a fiscal realignment plan from the administration that's required by law that illustrates for us how we're going to make up for any increases or decreases. So fiddling with amounts, fiddling with timelines, and even passing this bill as it was presented, I find it to be very, very premature at this time because we aren't operating with all the information necessary for us to make an informed decision. And I'm concerned about the idea of making these kind of amendments because what they do is they signal that we somehow have a handle on what's needed. And from my vantage point, Mr. Speaker, we are so far away from that right now. We don't know what's on the table. We don't know where these cuts are going to materialize at. We don't know whether the economic activity of the tax reforms are going to generate additional revenues. We don't know whether this 2% or this 1% or whatever percent we end up passing or entertaining is going to be sufficient for the duration to which this amendment is trying to make it for 1 year. There's a lot of unknowns that we are very, very far away from fully understanding at this point. So I have a difficult time supporting this amendment, not because I don't want to sunset tax increases, but because I don't know what the needs are. That's my first point. My second point is this whole issue of sunsetting business privilege taxes, I'm very uncomfortable with, because a sunset in the tax does not mean a guarantee in the rollback in prices. You know, I was a history major at the University of Guam, but you don't need to be a history major to recall back when our predecessors in previous legislatures raised the GRT at the time, and then they rolled it back. I think it was 6 months later, if I'm not mistaken. They rolled it back relatively quickly, and prices didn't drop. And I know this firsthand because back then I was drinking a ton of green tea. Every day I would drink so much green tea. I think Senator Morrison, that's the green tea I would drink. I would buy that green tea every day. And when the GRT went up, I saw my green tea prices jump. When the GRT rolled back, they didn't go back down. And so this sunset and twiddling or fiddling with the duration and having it appear to our people that we're somehow going to eliminate the pain at the cash register, I'm not convinced that that's actually going to happen if we were to make it 2 years, get 1 year. And that's why I'm very apprehensive towards any tax increase. Because I've seen how these tax increases cause prices to go up, but then prices don't go down when the taxes get rolled back, whether it's 2 years from now or 1 year from now. And so that's why I'm very adamant that we do not create the impression that because of these amendments we somehow agree with or validate the information that's being presented, nor do we have that create the impression that this avenue that we're on today with the entertainment of Bill 245 is the only path, because it really should not be. So it's because of that, Mr. Chairman, that I'm apprehensive towards supporting the amendment, not because I don't want to see taxes rolled back sooner, but because I'm very uncomfortable with the presumption that all of this is the right direction for us to be taking at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lees, on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm in agreement with the retiring speaker. I believe that we should have an up or down vote on the governor's proposal. You know, we were called into special session, and as core chair, I approved the expedited referral of all of the bills that were introduced. And, you know, we could potentially go through a whole myriad of amendments today, and I just don't think that I could support one of them. You know, I offered an amendment previously. We had discussed it during the public hearing, but at this point, I just feel like we're being rushed. We're being rushed to raise taxes to address this impending cash crisis. And I believe that the prudent action for this body would be an up or down vote on the governor's bill. I oppose amending it further, and I ask my colleagues to do the same. I really oppose the entire measure because I think it presents a false choice, Mr. Speaker, a false choice without all the information that we need. There's so much that we don't know, and we're being asked to vote without all the information. We don't know the full effect of the Trump tax cuts. We need more information from our economists and from employers about how this will affect their businesses. One of our colleagues yesterday evening raised some concerns about the use tax and asked for an update on that. We couldn't get that information. A concern was raised about compact impact funding, and that wasn't answered fully either. We are hearing that we could potentially face a payless payday, but they're not exactly sure when that might come and how short we are. So with all of these unknowns, I think it's just really, really irresponsible for us to say yes to this quick fix Band-Aid solution without really doing our work. And, you know, administration officials have told us, again, like I had mentioned, it's 2% or nothing. They will not compromise. But I think that there's a better balance for us to strike. So, Mr. Speaker, I I'm in opposition to any amendments. I think we should vote up or down on this bill. And I personally will be saying no to this bill because I understand, with the understanding that we're going to need to come back in here, come back to the table, roll up our sleeves, get more information, and find a way out of not only this current crisis, but we really need to discuss long-term solutions that won't further this crisis on the backs of working families and the businesses that serve them. And so, Madam Speaker, I think we need to thoroughly examine our options. We need to get more information to include meaningful reorganization. We need a fiscal realignment plan from the governor. We need specifics on an impending payless payday. How much are we short and when are we going to be facing this? We need a report by our economist, Mr. Hiles, if he could report to the SES on the next impact of increased incomes in withholding taxes on the tax base. We need to think about collecting the outstanding revenues that are already owed to this government. There's potential money that we can realize by collecting those taxes. And I know that this body approved in our budget increased full-time employees for rev and tax, and we haven't heard from them about how much has been collected with those employees that we've approved. We need to consider at the very, very, very last step, if we need to look at revenue increases, they need to be revenue increases that don't place the burden on the most vulnerable in our community. And I think that's what this bill does. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Lee.
Madam
Speaker.
Chair. Madam Chair, I think, Madam Chair,
Sorry,
just,
Senator Morrison, did you have a point of order?
Some information. I think the author of the amendment was being allowed to read a letter that was attached to follow his amendment. If he could be allowed to read the letter from the governor.
Senator Castro, were you interrupted? Did you want to continue? Yeah.
No, I wasn't interrupted. I think those were appropriate comments. But Senator Morrison's referring to a letter from the administration that's forthcoming. I'm just waiting for
All right.
an authentically signed copy from the governor himself. And so I understand it's being routed now, which may address one or more of the issues that were raised from the previous
All right.
speakers.
And you will have that opportunity on closing on your amendment. On the amendment, Speaker Cruz, you are recognized on the Castro amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I appreciate the fact that Senator Castro is trying to change the enactment date, and I know that my Bill 244 had a one-year enactment date, but I was going to be moving today for even a shorter enactment period. As many of the questions that have been posed here and objections is the administration's just not moving fast enough or acting like there really is a crisis. Thankfully, the new acting director of administration was honest enough to say that their vendor payables is $41 million. $41 million in an $800 million budget is fairly substantial. So we know that they haven't, and he admitted that the $41 million included health insurance that hadn't been paid. So it's dire. Let me tell you, I would not have introduced my bill or any bill for a tax increase, but for the fact that OFB was the one that made the calculations and realized that the administration's 3% loss in withholding was actually closer to 20%. And we were the ones in OFB that increased their projection from 47 to 67, because there is an impending crisis. But as you heard from the administration yesterday in some of their responses, they're in first gear or they're in cruise control. we need to put them into overdrive, or at least come out of first gear. When this legislature makes request of any of the administration officers and try to do something, they've got to act and not just, I can wait until December because we're out of here. I'm retiring, so I don't care. It's some other governor's concern. 1 year, 2 year, it's going to be outside of this administration's term. And they'll just figure, kick the can down the road and let somebody else deal with it. When I have my opportunity, I will be making an amendment that will have an enactment date that starts on April the 1st and ends on June the 1st, with authorization for continuing authorizations. But this administration's got to understand that when we ask for information, it can't be responsive, go to pausa, and wait until I get around to it. They've got to do something. They can't be telling individuals in the community who want to assist them and move the Amazon contract or the Airbnb contract to cease and desist because they haven't figured out what they're going to do or why they don't want to move forward. They've got to act. The administration presented a whole list of tax increases that they're proposing. Well, let's do the month of March. Have them, when we asked yesterday how come the fiscal realignment plan was not provided, the response from the administration was, we only issued the CRER on the 21st, which was the day before yesterday. We were in a hearing all day yesterday, and we were there last night, so we haven't had a chance to sit down and write it. Well, spend the first 2 weeks of March writing it, come back with your fiscal realignment plan, and we'll deal with it. But there is a fiscal crisis and a fat cash crisis that they're going to be facing, but they need to understand this legislature is willing to assist them, but they have to assist us, assist them. And staying in first gear or cruise control is not acceptable. They've got to go into overdrive, and all the suggestions that they had should come down to this body by the 15th of March with written bills on how we're going to increase the manpower development by increasing the cost of H2 applications by 1,000. All the other ideas have to be brought into. But if it's 1 year, not my problem. So though 1 year was something that I had in 246, I've since reconsidered it after watching the responses yesterday from the administration, and so I will object.
On the Castro amendment, Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment. Madam Speaker, yesterday when I asked the question of moving up the date from April 1st or the proposed April 1st timeline to March 1st, I asked if it was workable. The administration came back with information stating the urgent need to move this date up to March 1st. And, previous speaker outlined some of the challenges with the cash situation. So, Madam Speaker, in light of that, I'd like to amend the amendment to state, basically striking out the following enactment of this act of by Imagalahin Guahan and add on March 1st, 2018. or I'm sorry, after it basically states here shall be immediately effective and implemented. I like to, the amendment already basically strikes out the original language of following the enactment of this act, but Madam Speaker, after that, I'd like to basically add March 1st, 2018.
Effective on March.
Or, Madam Speaker?
Point of order,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Madam Speaker?
Senator Morrison.
Okay, I'm reading the original language, but I guess shall be strike out immediate effective and implemented to March 1st, 2018.
All right.
I
Senator
apologize.
Morrison, I think it's in the same section of the bill, your amendment, but it's to a different part of that sentence. Is it okay we proceed? I think we should proceed with the original amendment first. Or do you think it's material to this original amendment?
Well, I just want to make sure that that everyone's aware of what date the actual effective date is. You know,
All right.
that's why I was looking for clarification yesterday during the committee of the whole, if effective immediately
I
or
think,
immediate.
all right,
Immediate, unless legal can correct me, if immediate effective and implemented is kind of clear to say that whenever the governor signs it or whenever it's transmitted or signed, it's effective. But then again, that poses another issue because there's no actual time
right.
frame.
Senator Morrison, we will entertain this amendment, but I think we're going to close out on the Castro amendment
Just a-
without this.
So, Madam
Yes.
Just a technical point here, I'm sorry. So legal did clarify on line 13. That should also be amended to read 1 year. So it's consistent with my original amendment. So that would be line 6 and line 13 of the same page, page 8. We're amending 2 years to read 1 year. So thank you to the professional staff.
All right. Senator Morrison, do you understand? Is that all right? We're going to proceed with the 1 year versus 2 years, and we can take up the March 1 versus
Point of information, Madam Speaker.
effective immediately. Yeah,
Madam
just one
Chair,
sec.
point of information, is this an amendment to the amendment, or are we trying
That's
to?
what he was proposing. That's what I'm
Because
clarifying right now.
it doesn't look like it's an amendment to
I know,
amendment.
that's why that's what I'm clarifying. I'm asking we're going to put this off and as a separate amendment.
Thank you.
Senator Morrison, thank you. So on the Castro amendment, changing in line 6 and line 13 from 2 years to 1 year. Is there anyone on the Castro amendment? Senator Castro, you may close on your amendment.
I don't have the governor's letter in front of me, but I just want to state for the record that the 1 year sunset wasn't originally my idea, but I see it as a good faith offering to compromise to meet the administration on one or more points of compromise. And so I understand the letter's forthcoming. I just wanted to be reflected that this is one of those points that was raised either at the hearings or in the committee of the whole. And so that's it. That's all I want to say. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There are quite a few people absent right now, but on the Castro amendment, all in favor? Or is there any objection to the
Yes.
Castro amendment? Objection. All right. So all in favor, please raise your hand for
Madam
the
Speaker,
clerks.
Madam Chair, I'd
Yes.
just like to say that
Do you have a point of
I
order?
object, please, because I'd like to see the letter first. There's so many ifs and ands
Oh.
here, and we couldn't get straight answers last night when we asked direct questions. It's not adding up, and I'm not willing to push something on the people of Guam with nothing concrete.
All right. Senator Castro has asked for a 3-minute recess. We'll be in recess for 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we're back in session. Senator Castro, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I was sharing earlier, the governor's letter was forthcoming, and I think all the members should have a signed copy of the governor's letter. I'll go ahead and ask you, ma'am, if it's okay if I read it into the record.
Please proceed. It's up to you, Senator.
Okay. Hafaday Speaker Cruz. As you are aware, my administration has proffered multiple solutions to address the imminent and dire fiscal challenges our government is facing as a result of the recent past federal cuts, as well as the decades-old financial challenges facing the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. Working with your office and Senator Dennis Rodriguez, we have offered lifting exemptions. After listening to public discourse from both public and private sectors on this proposal, we have modified the proposal and submit Bill 245 before you, which temporarily raises the business privilege tax by 2% for 24 months. After listening further to the concerns expressed by the public and senators at this week's public hearing and session yesterday, I want to reaffirm my commitment to working with the Guam Legislature to arrive at a bill that is acceptable by both the legislature and my administration, a bill that would stabilize our government and provide the necessary financial support to our public schools and Guam's only public hospital. I offer the following compromise: an agreement to reduce government spending and seek alternative revenue-generating initiatives based on a 2% BPT increase effective March 1st, 2018. I am also committed to establishing a fiscal realignment and government stabilization committee comprised of members of the Guam Legislature and me. The committee's duties include, but may not be limited to, reorganization and fiscal realignment. The committee will be tasked with assisting me to identify positions, programs, agencies, and functions that may be reduced, consolidated, or removed in order to arrive at a leaner, more cost-effective government without compromising critical services. As my fiscal team stated, I am committed to working with the legislature to cut up to $30 million. Removing exemptions in lieu of taxes. The committee will assist my administration with identifying exemptions and drafting legislation to reduce or eliminate such exemptions in order that we may roll back the 2% BPT increase by the agreed to sunset date. Some of the exemptions are outlined in Bill 230. Number 3, alternative revenue generating options. I also support the identification of other revenue generating options such as surcharges, the use of electronic commerce to enable the provision of a government service or product, amending and enforcing the use tax, and an internet tax, just to name a few. I have listened to the testimonies, read the concerns, and accept many of the recommendations proffered by members of the public and the Guam Legislature. I have presented a compromise of working on the aforementioned items as part of the duties of the Fiscal Realignment and Government Stabilization Committee. All I am asking is that the legislature approve Bill 245 at the current 2% BPT increase and to be implemented on March 1st. In the last 6 months, you have heard from employees in the community about the need to help the hospital provide life-saving health care for the sick, are suffering, and are dying right here on our island. You have heard from parents, brothers, sisters, relatives of patients, concerned citizens. You have received resolutions in support of finding a dedicated fund source to finally give the hospital needs to improve the delivery of health care. You've heard the testimonies, some of which provide alternative solutions to funding the hospital and some of which attack the management of the hospital itself. The bottom line, however, is that the Guam Memorial Hospital is Guam's only safety net hospital. It is the only hospital that patients are transferred for treatment after being stabilized at other hospitals and clinics. Guam Memorial Hospital is the only hospital that operates year after year with a $30 million shortfall. I implore the senators to do the right thing in the legislature that has once and for all addressed a 40-year-old problem. In closing, my administration has listened to the concerns of both the public and the legislature and made every accommodation to address the urgent matters. We have offered multiple compromises and urge you to take action on the full 2%. Failure to act will result in severe consequences. I am humbly requesting that the Guam Legislature at least meet me halfway and not allow Bill 245 to fail without an alternative measure that will provide the necessary cash flow to stabilize government operations and not have to furlough or terminate employees, implement a reduced work week, or suspend government services. In these critical times, we must come together and arrive at a solution that is in the best interest of the people of Guam. I believe that Bill 245, with the agreed-to amendments and a commitment to identify more reductions in government spending while working on an alternative revenue-generating initiatives, is a good start. Sinceramente, Imagalahin Guahan, the Honorable Eddie Bazacavo. Thank you.
All right, on the Castro amendment, all in favor, please raise your hand on the Castro amendment. Amendment fails. All right, Senator Morrison, did you want to speak on the bill?
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, I have I have an amendment before our colleagues, I believe, and as discussed previously, I also mentioned in the governor's letter, there's the March 1st timeline, and also was mentioned in the Committee of the Whole that we work to a more specific date for the enactment of or the effective date of this measure. So, Madam Speaker, before you is an amendment to, on Section 3, Item A, to strike the following sentence: following the enactment of the act by E. Magalain Guahan, and add on March 1st, 2018. So, Madam Chair, that makes it very specific. I also thank legal counsel for clarifying some of the concerns that should this measure be passed, that this could be enacted or effective immediately. And what we were addressing yesterday was having some time for the community to prepare should this measure pass. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the Morrison amendment? Senator Cruz, Speaker Cruz.
Madam Chairman, I appreciate the introduction of the amendment. I appreciate the introduction of the amendment. It's just impossible for the business community to be able to address this. This is next Thursday. Everybody that's out there that has a business, some checker or some employees at all the Payless stores and every Kmart and everything is going to have to run through the store and change all of the little price tags that's on the front of it, or worse yet, run through and change the price tags on each of the items that's on the shelves currently. Because starting March the 1st, there's going to be a 6% sales tax, gross receipts tax that wasn't anticipated even today. That's why I recommended that it be the April 1st. It's just impossible for those businesses to be able to do that. And I feel sorry for everybody that has contracts that they wrote in their 4%, and now effective next month are going to be 6%. As I told you, I was approached by an architect at a funeral and said, give us some time so we can rewrite our bids so that our new contracts, we'll have 6%. Yes, the front page of today's paper says there's $1 billion worth of contracts that are going to be opened in the next couple of months. For every $100 million contract, there's a $4 million gross receipts tax that's written in. Increasing it to 6% immediately means that that business is going to have to figure out where it's going to raise that additional $2 million in gross receipts that we want revenue tax to collect from them for the contract that they got, for the privilege of doing business here on Guam. We need to have the time between now and April the 1st to be able to sit down and talk about what the Director of Revenue and Taxation mentioned yesterday. Well, when you guys did this in 2004, there was a provision that took care of that. Well, it's not in this legislation. So before the effective date, we're going to have to try to figure out during the month of March how to be able to address that. And lots of other exemptions that need to be addressed with this. So I object.
Thank you, Speaker Cruz. Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Speaker and Madam Chair. You know what's interesting is I just received a text from a family member who went out to purchase a particular item. This item I had purchased several pieces last Saturday. And then when my family went to just this morning to purchase that particular item, it went up 10 cents. That's the reality of how businesses operate. If they have to cover the margin so that they can continue to provide a service or that product, then the prices naturally would have to increase for them to continue to provide that product or that service to our community. But Madam Chair, I look at just 53 days ago. In the last 53 days, what has happened in our community? We have seen, by virtue of action by this body, the liquid fuel tax increase, which is dedicated, yes, to repair secondary and tertiary roads. So that went up by 4 to 6% cents per gallon. Madam Chair, we've seen the gas increase by 15 cents a gallon. We also saw our power rates increase by 15% earlier this month. And guess what, Madam Speaker? That's not done. The agreement that was rendered and approved by PUC was that in order to recover the LEAC rate for GPA, it was two-tiered. In February, they're going to receive an adjustment. I believe the figure was 15%. And then in May, the balance of that agreement would further adjust the power rate another either 11 to 15%. And then we also saw the water rates increase as of February 1st. Madam Speaker, without any action by this body, with the exception of the liquid fuel tax, the cost of living on Guam is increasing. When you listen to small businesses out there, and they share directly, and I'm sure that some of these small businesses have reached out to each and every one of our colleagues here, is that the margin is minimal in many cases. Increasing the taxes is going to affect their ability to operate. And in one instance, a small business owner, in my opinion, providing a critical service to our community, said it is going to kill us. That business may have to shut down. And I can almost assure you, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, that if in fact that business shuts down, because I'm familiar with that business, that many of us in this hall may share some serious concerns about that because of the nature of the service that's being provided by that small business. I've also heard from some of our people out there in the community that are saying they live from paycheck to paycheck. Guess what? Now they have to pay for the increased power. Not only as of February, but also in May when it's adjusted further upward. Now they have to pay for the increased water rates. Now they have to pay for the liquid fuel tax whenever they go gas up their vehicles. And then now they also have to pay for the increased gas. and my family member had to pay 10 cents more for a product, an item that he acquired this morning, Saturday to today. It went up by 10 cents. Madam Chair, there's got to be another way to resolve or to address this situation rather than increasing taxes on our people. And I literally say taxes on our people because the businesses, in most cases, would automatically transfer the cost to the consumers and to our people out in the community. So I'm asking our colleagues, if we need to spend hours day in and day out and look at specifics and make decisions that ultimately a piece of legislation will come out of this body that would not increase the burden on the backs of our everyday people, then we really should do that. That's what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for streamlining this government. I'm advocating for making sure that Mr. John Fernandez, the Superintendent of Education, doesn't have to trim $18 million or $12 million from the Department of Education. That our Guam Fire Department does not have to trim $2.7 million out of their agency, knowing full well that part of their plan is to shut down possibly fire stations that are providing critical services to our community. If it means consolidating agencies, if it means implementing a complete hiring freeze, if it means making sure that we can identify either other funding sources or other measures so that we can assist this government in transitioning from its present state of finances to prioritizing education, public safety, and healthcare, then we need to do that. And that is the position that I am advocating. I am not advocating that, in fact, we make decisions that are unjust. I'm advocating that we don't implement, whether it's March 1st, whether it's April 1st, or any other dates. There are natural increases in this community, and I highlighted 5 of them by virtue of operations out there, whether it's GPA, GWA, or businesses. Madam Speaker, the cost of living is going up. Our people who are living paycheck to paycheck now no longer can spend any minimal disposable income that they had. And what's even more hurtful is that our retirees who live on fixed income, Madam Chair, have to absorb all these costs. And then if we pass a tax increase, they're going to have to pay that additional cost. And where is that coming from? That's coming from money that they would otherwise purchase medicine or purchase insurance or put food on their table on a fixed income, Madam Chair. On a fixed income. Our retirees and our everyday people don't deserve an increase in taxes to this community and our small businesses. At least at this point in time, until we do our homework. And I literally say do our homework, we sit down and we meticulously go through every single expense that this government is going to undertake over the course of the next 7-8 months. Make those decisions so that our people will know that this body is coming forward and saying, yes, education, public safety, and healthcare are critical core services of this government, and we are going to focus on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the Morrison amendment, no other speakers. Senator Morrison, you may close on your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleagues for providing some comments on this amendment. But, Madam Speaker, again, I'm just trying to make sure that there is an effective date or a timeline that is clearly outlined in the bill, so that there is a date that will ensure that should this measure pass, we know what date we're working with. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the Morrison amendment? Oh, yes, there is. So all in favor of the Morrison amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment fails. On the bill, is there any other speaker on the bill? Speaker Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have several amendments, but let me just start off with one that I hope that I can prevail on, and then that way I'll get at least one amendment through, and that's on page 9, section 5, voter approval not required. In the current bill, it's a notwithstanding. My proposal is very simply, if we're not going to comply with the statute that requires us to take a tax increase to the people, and if the Attorney General is issuing opinions that say it's unenforceable and she won't enforce it and we're not bound by it, then let's just be honest and repeal it. Then that way we don't have to deal with it any further.
Does everyone have a copy of the amendment? It's been passed out. It's to repeal Section 16311 of Title 3, Guam Code Annotated. On the amendment, on the Speaker's amendment, Senator Uggan.
I know, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I know the good speaker wanted to start off with a piece of amendment that would delete a requirement for referendum on tax increases required. And with all due respect, Mr. Speaker, I stand in opposition to your proposed amendment, and I understand your intent. But you know, Madam Chair, as I look at this, it reminds me of that phrase, government of the people, by the people, for the people. This is exactly a provision that is in law that lives up to that particular phrase. Let me just read it for those who are watching. The provision is subsection 16311, referendum on tax increases required. It says, notwithstanding any other provision of law, no increase in real property tax, liquid fuel tax, business privilege tax, or any locally enacted and administered tax on Guam shall go into effect without the approval of the voters of Guam in a referendum held during a general election. The manner in which a proposed tax increase shall be placed in referendum before the voters of Guam pursuant to this section shall be as follows, and it proceeds with the sub-item A. But it says simply, in my interpretation, that no taxes shall go into effect without the approval of the voters of Guam in a referendum. Madam Chair, if in fact there was a proposal before this body to increase taxes back in January 1st, 53 days ago, and we required, with the exception of the general election, in a special election, that the question be posed to our voters, we would by this very time have a response from the public and the community in terms of any proposed increase in taxes. And I say that because it goes back to that original statement that I said, of the people, by the people, and for the people. We have to ask ourselves the question, is this a government of the people? And I understand about the opinion of the Attorney General of Guam, Madam Chair, and it's an opinion. It's her legal interpretation of what this legislature can do. And we know that this legislature can insert the phrase notwithstanding. But why go against the law, which stands on the basic premise of government, which is the government exists for our people. It doesn't exist to increase taxes for government operations, but it exists for our people. And if all this says is that if this government, either through this body or in any other form, wants to increase taxes on our community, our people who are the ones ultimately going to have to spend the money, that they would have the first say. They would vote yes or no. If it says no, if our people decide to no against any tax increase, then it brings us right back to this very table, this very session hall, to make the decisions that we should be making today. And that's streamlining our government so that we can ensure that whatever revenues this government generates, it goes to the core services that are being provided by this government, which are education, public safety, and health care. So with all due respect to the good speaker, I oppose the proposed amendment. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
On the Speaker Cruz amendment, would anyone else like to speak? Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, all points brought up by the retiring speaker certainly have a sentiment that echoes in the general public, and we do know that the voice of the general public is very critical to our decision-making process. And we know that the exercise in our legislative process in allowing for bills to be put forth at public hearings that are noticed well in advance, at least on 2 occasions prior to the hearing of a public hearing, provides for exactly that, the feedback, the sentiments, to be heard and documented in public record on any bill, any proposal. But I just want to point out one thing. As a legislature, we are provided, per the Organic Act, the role to increase taxes and fees, among other things, and generally to set policy. So to some degree, yes, we don't want to do things that are against the grain and sentiments of the general public. But I do think that we also have an obligation as senators to make those hard calls, to deliberate the unpopular issues, and to come to a decision as a body, and not to always, by policy of our own, delegate that duty in the form of a referendum. And I just want to point out that I can see that point, but there comes a time where we have to decide, and that very topic has been asked and addressed by the Attorney General at least on 3 separate occasions with the same conclusion. It is well within your authority to do this very act, to raise fees and taxes as a legislative body. And for one legislature to bind all future legislatures by insisting that a referendum has to occur anytime that exercise happens, the Attorney General recognized is not proper. And in fact, you cannot do that. So in terms of repealing it, that makes sense. The legislature can, on occasion, decide what it wants to do. But to have it in statute that this is the way it always has to be, I don't agree with. But I think mostly, and I just want to bring the point up to our legislators, it is well within our duty as prescribed by the Organic Act to do this very thing. So to say that we shouldn't or we must not, I don't think is quite what was contemplated in the Organic Act. And I'm just making that fundamental question. So I do support this repealing this section because it has been recognized by the Attorney General on more than one occasion that it is in fact an awkward thing, and that to have this in statute and to bind all future legislatures in this manner is in fact incorrect. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. I'd like to recognize the presence of Governor Calvo. If there's no other wish of the body, Senator, on the amendment, the Speaker Cruz's amendment, Senator San Nicolas, and then Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. Several things. First of all, because it's already an existing law, the inclusion of this notwithstanding language does at the very least provide a check and balance in that it does require for the legislature to acknowledge that we know that the people should have been asked, and we're intentionally bypassing that with the language that's being inserted. I'm not a fan of doing that, but that's how operatively has been working over the years. I'm concerned about the implication that this amendment is actually substantive, in that the original language was just a standard notwithstanding language, but this language that's being added is going to actually repeal a section of public law that would change the practice of including the notwithstanding provision. And I'm of the opinion that if we're going to be taking away that process and repealing that law, that it will be substantive beyond what's in the current language, and the public should be afforded the opportunity to come and speak as to whether or not they support the actual repeal of that public law.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
What is your point of information,
The
Speaker?
point of information is that Bill 244, as introduced and as heard day before yesterday, included this exact provision, repeal. And the public was given the opportunity to comment on it and did not, or so they had an opportunity. There is no need to have another separate hearing on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may beg to differ, but and that just further, though, underscores the point of kind of why I think we're here today. Even the hearing of Bill 244 commingled of Bill 245 and commingling the question of repealing the public involvement in the referendum, I think that we've involved way too many variables into a single public hearing, to the point where even the public hearing itself turned into a, I want this and I don't want that, I want 244 or I don't want it, I want 245 or I don't want it, and it created an either or type of hearing as opposed to a more thorough analysis of what was being vetted. And if we can recall how the public hearing turned out, it became a question of, well, I don't want to cut pay, I want 245. When really, if you were to evaluate each of those bills in their individual merits and perhaps have heard them separately, we would have had more of the business community come out and speak to the detriment of 245 as a standalone measure. But I digress. I don't want to get into the nuances of what or how we should be holding our public hearings and how they may or may not convolute the elements that are contained in our bills. I just want to talk about what's in Bill 245. And Bill 245's language does not include that. This amendment is seeking to include that. And I'm really of the mind that if we're going to be excluding our people from the process, we need to very clearly notify them that that's what's going to be happening and allow for them to, on that very specific purpose, be able to appear and testify in a public hearing. But again, the ruling of whether or not it's substantive and whether or not if it was heard in a different bill and it should apply on this bill is relevant, that would be a decision of the chair. But I just wanted to voice my opposition to the amendment. I think that if we're going to entertain something like that, we should definitely do it as a standalone measure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator San Nicolas. As the acting chair, it is my ruling that this is a materially different amendment to the bill. It may have had a public hearing in reference to another bill. So that's my ruling, and I will leave it to the body if they wish to overrule me. Subject to a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make the motion to overrule your
your
All
ruling.
right, all in favor of overruling the decision of the chair as to this, the material difference of this amendment and to allow it to go forward? All in favor? Or any objection? Or yes, all in favor, please raise your hand.
Can you point of information, Madam Chair, can you please repeat what your
Yes, so
the
we're going to vote right now on a motion to overrule the chairperson. The chairperson's ruling was that this amendment is materially different to the bill and therefore out of order, and but he's made a motion to overrule that decision. And if it is overruled, we will continue with discussion on this amendment. You would like to discuss the motion? If you would like to. I will allow it. We've allowed other discussion on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to oppose the motion to override the decision of the chair. Madam Chair, I think you made a very prudent decision in regards to ruling that this particular item is somewhat non-germane or immaterial to the legislation that we are discussing right now. And the reason I say this is because this would set precedent, Madam Chair, whereby I take two pieces of legislation that deals with similar topics and issues, and then after the conclusion of that particular public hearing, I can decide to consolidate and take from some of these other provisions, this other piece of legislation, and consolidate it into one, when in fact our people provided testimony to each of the individualized pieces of legislation, although they may be dealing with the same topic. So I think that this, if in fact the decision is to overrule the decision of the chair, it would be setting precedent in terms of how this body is to proceed. And I certainly hope that should the motion to overrule the decision of the chair pass, then please be mindful of the precedent that will be set. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So on the motion to overrule the chair,
Am I allowed to speak on the motion?
I thought you already did, Senator.
No, I
All
made
right,
the
please
motion, but
proceed.
if you
Please
opened it up
proceed.
for...
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to what previous speaker and the retiring speaker, there is actually precedent for this, and the precedent for this in these types of amendments, if they were existent in other bills and other provisions, and if they are related under the same topic, the precedent is set in every other Senate, in every other Congress, both federal and local. This is how policymaking happens. If we're talking about a notwithstanding clause on a provision, and I commend the mover of the amendment, if we're talking about a notwithstanding provision and we want to take our jobs a little step further and address that specific notwithstanding provision and say, okay, well, if we're going to use a notwithstanding clause, maybe we can discuss the merits of it. But if we want to go through this whole process and waste more time and money, I just don't think it's that efficient. If we're here in a public setting, able to discuss a measure and vote on it, I think we should. So with respect to the comments that have been made, I stand with my motion to overrule. With all due respect, Madam Chair.
All right, on the motion, all in favor of overruling the chair, please raise your hand. 7, 8. Motion carries. So we'll continue discussion on this amendment. So on the Speaker Cruz amendment, Senator Nicholas,
Madam Chair, did he?
Senator Nicholas, you had the floor. All right, Senator Esteves, you are recognized on the Speaker Cruz amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I commend the mover of the amendment, and as I previously stated, if this is a topic and we're addressing the bill and we're using notwithstanding clause, I think it's important to talk about that notwithstanding clause. One of the previous speakers, the good senator from Santa Rita, had stated that taxation belongs to the legislative body, and that's all that the Attorney General had reiterated. Madam Chair, and again, I just have to commend the mover of the amendment again for having really a brave effort to move this forward, because this provision has always seemed like just a political play.
I think we're all very intelligent here and knows that it's really not constitutionally sound. And many lawyers, many attorney generals, not just our the only attorney general, that not just this one, have opined on this on many occasions. You can even go all the way back. You can go back to Attorney General Moylan when he was in office when this was brought up. Taxation belongs to this body of representatives. We are elected to represent the people. If we're going to pass off the responsibility, if we're going to pass off the risk of looking like the bad guy because we believe in something enough to say it publicly and propose it, then why have a legislature? I think it's a really good call to maybe just nix the legislature, and everything we want to do will just be done via Twitter poll. But the fact of the matter, and the AG opinion, was that it's not our power to delegate. It's not Senator Esteves' power to delegate. It's not any other senator's power to delegate the responsibility of the body that exists outside of the individual members, because we come and go. That's a matter of fact. But created in the Organic Act, this body of government has that responsibility. We don't have the authority to delegate it. That's what it comes down to. I know the analogy gets used a lot, Madam Chair, but you can't put the cart before the bull. So if we don't have the power to delegate it, and have never had the power to delegate it, because the Organic Act is very clear, then this law was never valid. And we understand that a law passed that is not valid and not organic is automatically void. So I do commend the previous speakers. I do commend the sentiment that we do want the people involved, and that's what the public hearing is for. And in 2018, people have more access to their senators than they have ever had. So this notion that we need a referendum in order to get the views of the people, I don't think that's accurate. I just got 45, maybe 50, 60 emails yesterday from different individuals in Gov Guam stating their different opinions. And those were emails to my office. If someone wants to FOIA them, sure. We can take a look at them. And they had differences in opinions on which bills they would support, what their thoughts were. So they do have access. We are not a Greek democracy, Madam Chairman. We are a representative democracy. I know this might sound off topic. In case people don't know, the president's not even elected by popular vote. It's elected by electoral college. We are, by all accounts, a representative democracy. If we want to go back to a Greek democracy, sure, but we're not going to do it here. We need to stay true to what we are. And so with that, I support this amendment, and I ask my colleagues to consider, because we're not going to be here forever. But we know we have the responsibility to look at taxation, to look at all the objectivity, to try our best to remove emotion from the equation, because that's our job, whether we like it or not. That's what we signed up to do, to look at the facts, to spend those hours on behalf of the people that voted us in. That's what a representative democracy is. And so I ask my colleagues to consider this amendment and to vote for this amendment, not for where we are right now, and so this stops being a political issue that gets used against this body, not us, but for the future legislatures. Because we all know here, when we have to consider taxes, fee increases, anything like that, we spend a lot of time, at least I know I do, looking at it objectively, crunching the numbers. So I ask my colleagues to support this amendment, and I do support it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. On the Speaker's Cruises amendment, are there any other speakers? Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of the amendment, and I go on the basis that we were put into the legislature by the people when they elected us to come in here and to represent them and to do the work that is in their best interest. I know that there's been occasions when we conveniently use this section of the law that that, oh no, this has to go out for referendum. And I certainly subscribe to the idea of the government of the people, by the people, for the people. But I think they also put us in here to act on their behalf. And if we do otherwise, we certainly will bear the wrath of the constituents who put us in here, who have then concluded that we did not act on their best interests, and will definitely get bounced out. But to have to go, and every time we want to make a move, we have to go out and it's not that I'm undermining basically the importance of the views of the constituents, but there's also the matter of practicality and in the things that we do, and in things like what we're trying to do right now. I think we need to take certain actions, and time is of the essence. And so I think there's got to be some practicality in the things that we do and how we look at things. Man mapulit ginigi sa tura ni para ta representay I interesi tau-tauta. Ja megay na Brian na jangin kalan maput zan satsagay I desisyon ni Sito Matsogwi no Libyano na taolok or no polo sa tanai I tauto gizung sa siyaw disidi sa jangin latsi hey hamzu dumisidi no tigwaho lo mena sa ta usa este na oportunidad di man manait esta man manain ni confianza niya sa mena sa ta disidi pagu hafan ni Sita para tatsogwi lo jangin para tananga ta lus tiki no malofana pagzo todo man madestrosa sa no tananga para sa no kalan no tsatsaga para jan maput na desisyon pues mena sa ta na para pagu este gini jangin Libyano ta na halo mi language notwithstanding jangin kalan satsaga no polo sa tanangas ki mamayla na leksyon basta neste na klasen babarias mana sa tatsogit sit sota pago pues tana fonadza na este na hinasu gini pago mena sa ta supporti este na amendment ni maproponin ni na para tanasua geleblo sa jangin hafa desisyon ni Sito Matsoge mana tatsogit sit sota mga mandangye Diyos masi.
Diyos masi. On the Speaker Cruz amendment, is there any?
Madam Chair, a point of personal privilege that because the previous speaker said mga tafandangi, and that means that let's not be, what is it, good Senator?
Senator, if the shoe fits,
No,
wear it.
no, I'm not wearing that particular shoe, Senator, but it's not because we're dungy, because we should always leave this decision to our people, and that's the argument I presented. This government is generating anywhere from $800 to $900 million a year, so we should stay within that premise, and anytime we're gonna request for a tax increase and take it out of the pockets of our hard-earned people, their hard-earned money, then we should give it the question to our people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the Speaker Cruz amendment, is there any other?
Point of
Senator,
information, Madam Speaker.
state your point of information.
The way things are right now, we are not currently an $800 million operation. With the new tax increase, that's the whole reason why we're here. I just wanted to bring that up as a point. We are no longer an $800 million operation in the government of Guam.
All right. On the Speaker Cruz amendment, is there any other senator who wishes to speak on the Speaker Cruz amendment? All right. There's been an objection. So on the amendment, all in favor, please raise your hand. There are 8 votes. Thank you very much. Amendment passes. Speaker Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have another amendment.
Could you please get the amendment passed out? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, the amendment that's being provided to all the members at this time is an amendment that I'm offering to reduce the increase in the business privilege tax increase from 6 to 5, but also I'm changing the enactment period. And the reason I'm doing this, Madam Chairman, is that I'm insistent that we've got to start acting like there is a crisis. In the, when we had the administration directors here yesterday, we asked questions and they weren't being answered. When we asked about proposals, they weren't moving as to where those proposals were to increase the taxes. If we give the 2-year period, they will continue on cruise control or on, worse yet, on first gear. What we've got to get all the administration officials and this legislature is we've got to shift into 5th gear and maybe into overdrive. If we give a 1-year period, this administration's out and the new administration's in, whoever it's going to be. So the administration individuals that were here yesterday may not need to move. There was a proposal that was being offered that was circulated earlier about having the administration come forward with their recommendations within 45 days. You just have to look at a bill that was passed earlier by this legislature from the good senator from Talafulfo that has a tax stamp for cigarette taxes. That was supposed to have had rules and regulations and implemented 90 days. It's been 7 months. And the administration, Brevin still hasn't written the regulations. It hasn't done anything to try to get that tax stamp in, which could possibly increase our tax collections by an additional $10 million by our calculations. Maybe even more. We have other tax proposals that were being recommended by the administration. There was a whole buffet of them that was given to us by the director of BBMR. But if we don't put a fire under them, they will continue in first gear or go to Paus responses. We've got to get them into overdrive. And so what I'm recommending is an enactment period starting April the 1st and ending on June the 1st of this year, with authorization for continuing authorization, with an understanding that we could have continuing authorization. Again, I admit to everybody, this is not a novel idea. Unfortunately, because I spent so much time watching C-SPAN and watching Congress, we saw how they were doing continuing resolutions for 5 days, for 8 days, for 2 weeks. And that was to try to get the Congress and the administration to address certain issues. Now I'm trying to, as we're always saying, let's get our salaries up to U.S. standards. Let's get everything up to U.S. standards. Let's do what the U.S. Congress is doing. Put their feet to the fire and everybody go into fifth gear and overdrive. And over the next 60 days, during this, until June the 1st, let's get all the legislation that we need in this body heard and acted on. Let's not wait 7 months to try to figure out whether or not we're going to do anything about the the Cigarette Tax Stamp Act, whether or not we're going to do anything about Airbnb or Amazon or whatever. We have a short period, and if they don't start to act, then on June the 1st, there's no need for us to address a continuation or an extension of the gross receipts tax. If they are acting and they're acting in good faith and we're moving, then maybe we can do it another 30 or 60 days to keep their feet to the fire. But if we give them until the end of the fiscal year, they've got Section 30 of $78 million that they'll use to carry them over. They've got April 15th and collections of gross receipts tax, the Section 30, to carry them. But we've got to force them to address all of these other issues. We cannot leave 1 or 2% on the backs of our people if that's the will of this body to pass anything. 1 or 2%. I'm saying 1. But if there's a move to try to take it back up to 2 and a 60-day period, that's another amendment. But I'm just saying we cannot leave everybody in cruise control or in first gear. We've got to move into overdrive. And the only way that I can see us doing it is to say, all right, fine. You'll get your 1 or 2% increase. But if you're going to talk about trying to raise the Airbnb and the collections, you prove to us that you're acting and you're moving by June the 1st. Otherwise, don't come to us and ask us for an extension. Otherwise, if we just give them until 2 years, they may not need to address it. So I'm asking my colleagues, please, maybe we're going to have to break my amendment into 2 parts and deal with the 5 to 6 amendment, the reduction, separate from the 30-day the period, and vote on them separately. But first, I think I'd like to do the enactment period provision and see how this body wants to move. And depending on how that vote is, will determine whether or not I move for the 5 or 6%, if that's amenable to the body. But really seriously, you saw the responses yesterday. You've gone to the SES. I have requested revenue and taxation from last December that still haven't been responded. I have, and with all due respect, and I want to recognize the fact that the governor is here. There was a mention yesterday about the need to address the Teason lease. And as I stated, I'd written several times over the last 3 years, renegotiate that Teason lease. Call the Teason lease in default because they weren't building the warehouses, they weren't finishing the edifice, they weren't moving in, they weren't getting occupancy. It wasn't. but nothing's being done. We've got to work like there really is a crisis, and that we've got to put the fire out, and not just a smoldering flame, but an actual fire. So I'm asking that we have the implementation date April 1st to June the 1st, and then it'll be revert back to 4% unless this body is satisfied that the fiscal realignment plan and the SES work on new legislation to address the taxes, so we don't have to continue to depend on this 2% or 1% increase in BPT or sales tax or whatever. We've got to act now. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Speaker Cruz. Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I too would like to recognize the presence of the governor who's in the session hall. You know, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, first of all, I oppose the proposal regardless as to whether it's 5%, 6%, April 1st, June 1st as a termination date. And it goes back to what I had shared with you a little earlier. But you know, Madam Chair, I'm not without looking at the crisis that this government is faced with. There was a circular that was sent out to individual agencies, and I commend the governor and his administration for doing that. And the numbers that came back yesterday that was discussed publicly was $15 million from the executive branch, $12 million from DOE, with the exception of classroom instructional impact. Aside from the textbook and the pre-K, $3.6 million from the judiciary, $1 million from the legislative branch. That's $31 million, Madam Chair. And then we look at other options that literally could be available to this government that would help bridge the lack of funds until we're able to overcome this challenge. One option that has been available and used in the past was giving the governor of Guam full access to all special funds, with the proviso that those funds will be reimbursed either within a year, with a designated time frame of a year, or within 2 years. So the governor would have access to the special funds. That's one aspect. Another one is revisiting all the special appropriations outside of the direct operations of our government agencies. Something that I mentioned repeatedly on more than 2 occasions was looking at the rollback of salaries of directors and deputies, of which would realize a $503,000 cost reduction of our government in any fiscal year. Implement a hiring freeze, with the exception of uniformed law enforcement, healthcare professionals, and teachers and educators in the classroom. But as a result of this, Madam Chair, I've also advocated consolidating functions and agencies, because we heard from Reverend Tax that they are in need of additional personnel to go out there and collect taxes. So if you consolidate and reassign and cross-train existing personnel within the government of Guam, they can render the direct assistance to Reverend Tax. The same thing applies to Department of Administration. But it's always tough when you're looking at consolidating, because, you know, Madam Chair, you take an agency and you consolidate it to some of these other agencies, for example, Reverend Tax, then you no longer will need a director, a deputy director, a secretary, and unclassified personnel in that particular agency. Yes, that's a tough decision. But these individuals are in unclassified positions. They understand the nature of their job, Madam Chair. But guess what? If we no longer need a director, a deputy, a secretary, and unclassified personnel in a particular agency, then that will translate into direct cost reduction, not only this fiscal year, but moving on into the next fiscal year. That's what I'm talking about, Madam Chair. If we are saying that this is a crisis, well, there's already been $31 million that's been identified in terms of cost reduction for the balance of the fiscal year. We also, if we allow the flexibility to access special funds, that's another option that's available to the chief executive. We need to provide him as much tools as we possibly can without burdening our everyday people out there in the community, without increasing taxes. Because, Mr. Speaker, I shared with the body here that just since January, we have seen significant increases in the cost of living here by virtue of the cost of gas, liquid fuel tax, power, water, cost of some of these products that are being sold out there in the community. So the cost of living is already increasing, and we have to be mindful of our everyday people out there and asking them to bear the burden of any tax increase at this point in time. I think it's unjustified. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Senator Castro, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to petition the body to recognize the governor. If we can have him, since we're in the committee of the whole, at least have a seat at the table to address any questions we may have, as a former member of this body and vice speaker. That way, many of the points that were brought up this morning could be addressed by the chief executive. So I don't know if it requires a vote, Mr. Speaker, but I certainly would like to see the governor here, or we can summarily ask him to leave. The governor would like to address the Guam Legislature,
No, I
Mr. Speaker.
understand, but please, nobody's going to ask any governor to summarily leave, so that was unnecessary. I'll invite him up. Stop. Governor, if you would please. This is the committee of the whole, and as a former member of this legislature, and inasmuch as we haven't risen, I'll allow him to address some of the concerns that have been stated, and then I guess he can go back to work and we can continue our deliberations.
Yeah, thank you very much again, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, and all the members of the body. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I've been here a few times, either in state funerals or in the State of the Island addresses. But for me, it has an emotional side here. I'm here in a committee as a whole. And because it's the same place my father served as a senator, both as a territorial party member and as a Republican member, and also my grandfather, Eduardo Jake Calvo, who was part of the construction, the senators, the congressmen that were there for the building of this esteemed hall. I was going to make just a short speech, and I'm here for questions as a committee as a whole, and in all sincerity as a fellow public servant, understanding that, and with all humility, that we are co-equal branches of government, but then at the same time, to answer any questions that you may have of such a pivotal bill that has such a consequence in terms of this administration, our government, our economy, the people of Guam in these next few months ahead. So I'm not really here to make an opening statement, but I would, after any questions had been entertained, make a closing, if it was possible. But if not, if I'm not allowed to, a closing on Bill 245, then I will make a statement. But I leave it to your discretion, Mr. Chair.
Why
and
don't you just go ahead
members.
and make a statement, and if there's any questions, they can follow it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the body, some of you I've worked with when I first came in. Guys, this is my last year, 18 years in public service, 10 of them as a senator, and now 8 years as a governor. Boy, time has changed. And again, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for playing that video the other day to show the people and myself how old I've gotten these past 8 years. I want you all to know that I'm here, again, in all humility, in a very consequential bill that, if acted upon, can stave off a crisis that was not the creation of this body, nor this administration, nor the people of Guam. It was a crisis that was created by a body that we have no vote on, and signed in by a president who we could not participate in his election. We talk about, well, we should have known about it. No. Everyone speculates whether it was health care reform, whether it was tax reform. We never knew what was coming down the pike. We knew something, and it's amazing, a little bit earlier, as we're forced to react, and some are saying this is such a quick and immediate piece of legislation that, if enacted, would cause businesses to move so quickly and have to react in pricing. It's amazing that same criticism of this body, the same reason we're here, is because a president and a Congress acted so quickly that even IRS hasn't been able to put out the proper forms. It had a dramatic impact in the United States government in their ability to keep up with this legislation. It was passed and it was enacted immediately. The way they solved the problem in regards to how do you do massive tax cuts for corporate from 35 to 21, how do you solve the question of 3% for every working man and woman in the United States of America? How do you take these massive cuts, which is good for stimulus, and yet pay for public education in the United States, pay for public health, Medicare, our Defense Department to protect our nation, all the services that are so critical for the stability of the United States of America? Well, they did what they've been doing for years. They borrowed $900 billion immediately. The $900 billion was paid for by retirement funds, by sovereign funds, by governments, probably China, Japan, bought a piece of this debt. And that's how they were able to continue to have money to provide critical services for the United States of America. We can't do that, and now we're in this situation. I would like to go back, and again, I hope you don't mind, history. And why are we dealing with a Bill 245 that had the immediate effects to our government and our revenues so that we could keep payroll and provide services? And we have to deal with it, something that was a left hook on us just about a month or so ago. And then why do we have a measure there for 0.75 for a hospital? I'm looking at all you straight in the eye. I'm here to compromise. I'm here for consensus. 3 years ago, on the measure that was put forward to get our hospital out of its situation that had been in for decades, I want to thank Senator Castro that had been pivotal in regards, and Senator Morrison was in our administration, and Senator Muñoz was so pivotal in looking at the hospital situation and how do we get out of it. And there was a lot of debate on it. I remember even the package I had sent out, and I was really looking to the guidance of you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted you folks to tell me what in the grab bag could we use to fund this $30 to $35 million shortfall in the hospital, plus about $8.5 million in debt service to fix it up and tear down an old wing and buy new equipment. And you asked us, what are the options? So we laid everything out on the table. BPT, property tax, I don't know, there was all kinds of different taxes, revenue enhancements that we believed that was part of the social contract of this government to keep this hospital stable. And somehow it got all so confusing that we wanted to raise everything. Tax here, tax here, tax here. You remember that? And so part of the solution was they solved one equation. We floated a bond, didn't touch the constant revenue source, the guaranteed revenue source that we required to make up for the $30 million shortfall, remember? We floated a bond, and what do? We got good interest rates, but it was only enough to pay. Remember, we had past due obligations. We paid off the past due obligations, and it gave us another additional working capital, $15 million. And I think I remember telling you all folks, okay, it's passed, thank you, and I wanted to thank you. But that means it did not solve the problem of the hospital. That money was spent the first year. Then I came back and I asked on the hospital, well, okay, you want one package, so was the BPT from 4 to 4.75. That was my solution. You wanted a set funding source. It's as simple as it's the biggest territorial tax, and I sent it over. We sent it over, and by the way, I'm not talking months, I'm talking years ago. I sent it over, and obviously I was listening to the speech and debate. I'm not a lawyer. I've known that since I was a senator since 1999, notwithstanding no legislative body can be tied by the actions of another legislative body. The Organic Act. Thank you, Senator Esteves, for history lesson of the Organic. I knew it, and if you all didn't know it, you should have knew it. But my bill died. It wouldn't even be heard. I couldn't even have a hearing. All the meantime, the hospital is running out of gas. And we're doing every effort to try to keep it afloat. So, we knew how bad it was. Some of you were upset about the hearse. You think I like that kind of stuff, but if you try to do everything, and you can't even have a hearing? So, last year, I'm really trying to work with you guys. I understood. Some of the leadership here said, okay, before we touch even any tax increase, then why don't we look at those companies that haven't been taxed? Exemptions. I think it was in insurance, in banking, in wholesale. I wasn't talking directly, but some of our people have been working with the senators and their staffs. And okay, I may not agree with it, because I know everything about that. Wholesale tax is double tax. Banking, the way it's done in Guam and the United States, there's a difference between net and gross. I understand that. Health insurance, okay, that's when here I am. I have a family company that's in health insurance, but we remember the history. That whole health insurance thing came about as a result of bringing billions of dollars from Japan and Korea for captive insurance companies. And they changed the law, and I understand, well, make local insurance companies participate, why only the outside companies? The end of it all, what happened? No outside health insurance company, no Mitsubishi or Samsung coming and self-insuring, no hundreds of $millions in bank accounts, and we could have loans and lower interest rate. It was only the health insurance companies in Guam that got this tax reduction. Good, and now they're saying we do it, it'll raise the cost of health care. I understand. But in a desire to work with all of you, as a man who has spent more time in the private sector than the public sector, as a man who had been accused as a senator and as a governor of always looking at the special interests of my family and my businesses, I thought you would look at the sincerity of me that I'm putting out a bill, may not agree with, but I'm putting out a bill that would tax my own family companies. A family I'm going to go back to in 10 months, whether it's health insurance or wholesaling, or even the BPT with retailing. I thought everyone would understand that I've been sincere. You know, if you're going to do something, and if you all believe that I'm all about self-interest of myself and my family, then you would at least look at me and say, well, you know, he was willing to even tap on his family's businesses, since I've been accused of that in the past, that I was in their special interest. So I did that. The only reason I introduced the bill is because I thought we'd have 8 sponsors to it. And I knew November, okay, nothing. December, nothing. January, nothing. I'm sorry if I surprised anybody, but my responsibility first and foremost was not any Cowell family business, not the business community. It was being governor and a hospital that was going down the tank. And if it goes down the tank, that means people's lives, not just jobs, it means lives. In all sincerity, that's why I introduced the bill. And I'm hopeful now, I got the heat for it, and I understand. You know, businesses were upset. So the reason for tying the hospital into Bill 245, it's because the can was kicked and kicked and kicked until the crisis that was not our making, and it intersected. The question I have, as I know some of you, I don't like to raise taxes. I'm doing it because we have to. People criticize me for equalization. Most of this is equalization. Just a little bit more to fund that hospital. And because our people committed to work with the schools. But since the Chamber of Commerce, that I'm going to be a member with in a year, I hope you, the members of the Chamber of Commerce, will allow me in. But when corporate Guam has already received a nearly 50% cut in their income taxes, and when corporate Guam now gives their paychecks to every employee, including Gov Guam giving their checks to every employee, whatever you see in additional money is not because of a raise by corporate Guam. It's because of a tax code that has changed and a government is taking less. They've already had, since the immediate ratification of this law, and I don't know how every one of their fiscal years ends, but whatever they calculated in pricing and costing and operational expenses, it had been done long before they even considered a President Trump. Long before they had even considered a Congress cutting their taxes in half. Where is the tax decrease? I mean, where are the cuts in the prices? And I'm sure maybe like what happened in the United States, Everybody got a bonus in some of these companies. Everybody got a pay increase in a lot of these companies. But as Bobby Sheringi and the Chamber of Commerce criticize us, I'm sure the calculations on income taxes that were made in the beginning of the year, whatever their year, that wasn't taken in consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, the only tax aside from this hospital that I've endorsed was a liquid fuel tax. Thank you, Senator Morrison, and all of you have voted for it. I did a little history, amazing. The liquid fuel tax was instituted decades ago, but it came to a price of 11 cents a gallon, 11 cents a gallon in 1983. Guess who the governor of Guam was? My dad, Governor Paul Calvo. 11 cents a gallon. So when you bought a gallon of gas in Guam in 1983, it was $1.50. And you had the 11 cents in there. It's the 11 cents was part of this tax. I mean, the cost. So $1.50 a gallon, and it's an 11 cents a gallon tax. You do the math on what percentage of the government's share of that gallon of gas, and that government's share then goes to keep our roads in order, to keep them fixed. Now, bodies in the past, of course, as the decades have gone, bodies in the past have taken some of that and used it to fund our beautiful UOG and GCC. Hey, we got to reconsider that. But before it went from 11 to 14 cents, you folks, that ain't ancient history. That's recent history. It was $4 a gallon. So you go $4 a gallon, and you tell me 11 cents of the pie goes to fix our roads that now have 185,000 cars. And by the way, when my dad was governor, we barely had 100,000 people. And the chamber is going to criticize us for inflation. Well, when it was 11 cents back in 83 at $1.50, and taxes haven't gone up on a gallon of gas until just recently to fix our roads, don't blame the tax for $4 a gallon. So when we went up to 14 cents a gallon, there's going to be a lot of roads repaired. And probably inflation will occur and the gas prices will go up. I can't believe it. I'm a conservative Republican and I'm scolding corporate Guam, and I got a bunch of a Democratic majority fighting me every step of the way, only on Guam. Ladies and gentlemen, my closing is this. I'm here for you. I'm here to answer every question you have. We know why we're here. It wasn't something in our control. I know I had a little discussion with Senator Lee. She's my relative. She's my niece. I have to be upfront with her because some of you guys, everything you say, obviously, it leads to what you're going to do. The reason why I'm here is to work with you. It's not to go vote up and down. It's to work in consensus. That's why I sent that letter. Let's see what we can do. What can we do? Where we can find the savings. This thing hit us like a left hook. I'm just asking for breathing room in the 2%, and then find a way to solve this problem that wasn't created by us. But if it's going to be no amendments, just a vote top and down, and we know what the result will be because of something not of our creation, and because of whether it's $67 million for the remainder of this year or $100+ million for a full next year, it means not only cutting of services, it's me, the guy whose buck stops here, that's going to have to issue out the furlough notices and the layoff notices. It won't be you. It'll be me. When I was at Pepsi, the last thing I would do is hit our people. If I had to cut this or cut that, or raise a price for a case of Pepsi? Yeah, I would risk the raising of the case of Pepsi price before I lay off my people. Well, if enough people are of the same belief, vote up or down, no consensus, not working with the administration, then I will be forced to do it. I will be forced to cut this government down. I will be forced to lay off people. But ladies and gentlemen, my dear fellow public servants, if I am forced to do that, and you do not come up with the solutions, the same as I said to Senator Lee, if every one of you don't have a solution, then I'm asking for your resignations. I believe as public servants, if we serve the people, and we can't treat Guam employees like they're some subhuman, if you're going to allow me that responsibility for signing someone's layoff, I'm looking at every one of you straight in the eye and say, resign. Because you did not work with this administration to keep this government stable and to keep this economy moving forward. I'm sorry I'm saying it with a little passion, but since you wanted me to say it, I said it, and I'm now looking for any comments or questions, and I'm ready to hear your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Nelson.
Governor, I want to thank you for coming in today. However, we are working, and we are working very hard to find other solutions. But I ask that you come before this body without harassing us. It's unprofessional, and I have so much respect for you. But I don't appreciate you coming in here and harassing us, threatening us. If we don't vote your way, that you're going to call for our resignation. That's all I ask.
By the way, I'm not harassing you. I'm stating a fact. If the body,
It's a
no,
form of
and
harassment,
allow me
Governor.
as governor of Guam, as your fellow
you're
public
using this
servant,
as a
if you're
platform
saying,
to
if you
bully
believe
us
it's
and harass
harassment,
us.
then I will tell you this. I want you to be with me when I lay the people off. Because if you are not going to come with an answer to my proposal, and right now, if we go with Senator Regina Bisco-Lee's answer, there will be layoffs. And I want you to be with me as I lay off our government workers. That is why I'm not harassing you.
Governor,
I'm telling you a fact.
Governor,
Thank you.
last night we inquired with the administration when the furloughs would happen. They would not give us a definite answer.
I have been asking for
Thank you.
SCE meetings. Mr. Speaker, God bless Senator Pangilinan. We had a lot of disagreements, but we had SES meetings, we had SA meetings, and maybe my people who are overwhelmed aren't giving you all the information, but since day one I've been asking for SES meetings. Since day one I've been asking for SAS meetings. People have been asking you. I say it on the radio, but I can't call it. So as everything's come as a surprise? Wait a minute, you folks have been in here. You are elected it's been not months, it's been already since last year. So why did we have an SAS or SES meeting at the end of the year when I had been asking? So yes, we've come to this point. I'm not going to harass you, but I'm going to be straight up.
All right.
Because this is about the people of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're in recess until 2 o'clock.